Good morning and welcome, and please be seated now. Thank you very much. In today by acknowledging that we are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. But what a happy day it is for us. It is finally time for a woman on the waterfront, and we are here today to unveil the 3 stunningly beautiful bronze figures designed and executed by our sculptor, Marlene Hilton Moore, who will be the next person at the podium. Regrettably, the signage is still to come, but it will be up shortly. The figures will be able to talk to you too, thanks to a cell phone app, which will be functional in the new year. And I don't know where Karen Oldfield is right now, but thanks to her, because it was her idea, and I think it's a great idea, and it will be fun for everyone. The only other bit of information I want to convey before we turn things over to Marlene is that there will be a phase 2 of the monument project that will involve the production and placing of interpretive panels telling more about the lives and work of our volunteers, and we hope they'll be all over town in the next year or so. So this project continues. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Marlene Hilton Moore, our distinguished sculptor, chosen for this project by a national competition. She will tell you about her experience with the project and introduce the unveilers, which of course is the climax of the morning.
So thrilled to be here today and welcome everyone. What an incredible crowd. I wouldn't be here if it were not for the Halifax Women's History Society. It is their vision and their dedication and their hard work to raise the money to allow this sculpture to be possible was first and foremost inspirational for me. Oh, okay. So am I not talking into this mic? Okay, am I now? Oh, right, great. I hope you didn't miss what I said, the vision of the History Society and how inspired I was by them. I have created 30 sculptures for public art monuments, 30 figures. So in all those 30 figures, only 3 have been women. So now I have 6 women under my belt, 3 of whom are here today for you forever. I love all the sculptures I make, but I am a woman, so kind of dear to my heart the sculpting of these figures for the World War II women volunteers. And I worked very, very hard. I've been asked this question by a couple of interviewers today about how long it took and so on. Well, it was a very short timeline for me because I create very detailed and complex sculptures, but in the end, it was kind of an advantage because I had nothing to do but just live with these women. And when I sculpt, I kind of hide myself away in the studio, and I work and work and make, and you know, I take the clay and just caress the cheeks, and I just really live with the women. And how do I find these women, I've been asked, and because they're not real women. You're real women. 3 of them are here today. Plus, actually, my wonderful mother, who did her own bit of World War II volunteer work when she was a young person. So I research and I look at what I'm trying to find. There was a brief that stated we would like 2 women. We would like them to be of different generations. We would like one of the women to be African Nova Scotian, and we would like a little girl. And so after that, the party was mine. So I found faces that I felt would inspire me. I would get little tingles inside when I saw some piece of research that said, that's exactly what I want in these sculptures. And so I don't want to give too much away about them until we unveil them, but I do want to say that they are life-size. They are cast in bronze from sculptures that I labor over in the studio, and they're on Nova Scotia granite bases. That was very important to me, to have the land they stand on right from here. And the bases are only 7 inches high, so it's no higher than a step. You can stand up beside them, you can wrap your arms around them, you can touch them, you can kiss them. And my goal always is to make my sculptures come alive, to make them so real, so that if 500 years from now someone stepped on this site, which they will, you will feel that they're just as alive today as they would have been 500 years ago when they were first made. They represent these amazing women volunteers. It's not, I've sculpted a lot of military figures, from General Sir Arthur Currie and to politicians, Wilfrid Laurier. But these women are as heroic. We just don't honor enough the work that women do behind the scenes, and I believe in that. Yes, thank you. Yes. I believe in that as much as I believe in anything. So now what I'm going to do, since it is my wonderful job gifted to me today, I'm going to read to you some bios of the World War II volunteers who are going to come up and unveil the sculptures. But first, I want to introduce and speak about Margie Pelche. She is a renowned basket maker. Oops, I'm losing my mic. A renowned basket maker from Waikagama, and she graciously agreed to create a basket for me for one of the sculptures. So beautiful basket. Nearly had a heart attack when I saw it. It was so complicated, and I thought, how will I prepare this to be cast in bronze? But wait till you see. So Margie says about her work. I'm just finding it here. She says of her baskets, basket weaving has been part of my life as long as I can remember. Influenced by my mother, I preserve the art form and traditional techniques of Mi'kmaq basketry with each basket I make. I also create innovative designs and forms that highlight the past traditions, which is what she did. Margie, could you just stand so people can see? Thank you. So our moment has arrived to begin the unveiling. So I will read you the bio of Charlotte Guy Jeffries, who is going to unveil the first sculpture. She will be escorted in a moment, but first I will tell you about her. Charlotte was an accomplished pianist and accordion player during the Second World War. Her talents were in high demand. She joined performers recruited to perform in theaters, concert halls, and at times on ships anchored in Halifax Harbor. She worked during the day and at night joined fellow entertainers to create shows and perform. Charlotte was also recruited to join the Halifax Herald's performing group sent to the UK, France, and Germany to entertain servicemen waiting to go home at the end of the war. So, Charlotte, would you like to come forward and unveil our seated woman?
A moment of high drama.
Yes! It's a double squared on. We're on the port.
Okay, here we go.
Men waiting to be shipped out from Halifax. After the war, Margaret was a member of the Portia White Choir. So Margaret, if you can come, Portia. Ah, obviously I don't come from here. Our next volunteer will be unveiling the last sculpture that still owns its robe, Joyce Purchase. Joyce remembers working a 4-hour shift at the North End Canteen every Friday afternoon. At 17, she and 2 friends stood behind a counter and served roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables to as many as 375 servicemen at one sitting. She helped salvage items from her own home in Rockingham to contribute to the war effort. So Joyce. Thank you.
It is exquisitely beautiful and so exciting to have. And our next step is to go into the market building to have a reception. Now, here I have to beg for your patience. This is a complicated process, apparently. And so I ask you to listen carefully. I feel like a school teacher. We're going to divide into 2 groups. And one group is the group here in the tent and so close by, and the other group is everybody else, okay? So group one under the tent, will, under the leadership of the Lieutenant Governor and his wife, will go in, slowly walk into the market through the north door, which is right beside.
How old are you, Margaret? 96. Congratulations on that, too. May I be as lucky. All right.
Good afternoon.
That came behind her. Get winded? Can you stop for a minute?
Oh, no, let's keep going. Let's keep going, okay. We'll find you.
Friends over the course of the time we've been working on the project, and many of our donors and supporters who are with us today want to say a few words. I advise those of you who are speaking, who are all lined up here ready to go, that nobody gets to eat until you're all finished. So if there is an incentive to ensure that you keep within the time limit, that should be it. Look at all your hungry fellow guests who are ready for something to eat. I first would like to introduce you to His Honor, the Honorable Arthur J. LeBlanc, the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, who will say a few words for us.
Good afternoon, almost. Former Lieutenant Governor Abraham and Francis, Minister Regan, Member of the Legislative Assembly Roberts, Member of Parliament Fillmore, Mayor Savage, Elder Peltier, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As the representative of Her Majesty the Queen in Nova Scotia, it is a great honor and pleasure to join you today for this very, very special ceremony. À titre de représentant de Sa Majesté la Reine en Nouvelle-Écosse, c'est un honneur pour moi de me joindre à vous aujourd'hui pour cette cérémonie historique. Today's ceremony to unveil a monument that pays tribute to the volunteerism of women during the Second World War has been a long time in the making. The figures in the monument represent thousands of unnamed women and girls who simply did their job because their country called them for service and to contribute to the war effort. Their efforts were indeed significant because of the impact, and yet the stories that we now know about them was not very well known throughout the last number of years. The work of Halifax Women's Historic Society is addressing this shortcoming, and this monument is the first major project of its kind in Nova Scotia. La cérémonie d'aujourd'hui de dévoiler un monument afin de rendre hommage aux femmes pour le bénévolat durant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale a été longuement attendue. Students of military history will know that Halifax was a major port during the Second World War. It was the staging area for hundreds of convoys taking vital supplies to Britain and to Europe. It was also the port of departure for tens of thousands of military personnel who enjoy their last moment in Canada, here in Halifax. Halifax constituait un port de grande importance et le lieu où des milliers de soldats, marins et aviateurs entreprenaient leur voyage vers Europe. Ensuring that the sailors, soldiers, and aviators were well looked after while they were in Halifax felt to those who remained. And this immense task was undertaken by volunteers, most of whom were women. Whether it was running magazine exchanges, serving meals in canteens, knitting scarves and mittens for military personnel, or as we see from the figures in the monument, even collecting scrap. All these efforts contributed to the colossal war effort. Although they did not serve directly on the front lines of battle, these volunteers experienced hardship. Accommodation for single women was scarce in Halifax, and they also experienced the deprivation imposed by rationing. Simply stated, it was not an easy time for those who remained in Halifax. Therefore, it is quite fitting that their story be told and their efforts be celebrated. C'était une période assez difficile pour ceux et celles qui habitaient Halifax durant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. In 2017, we have been celebrating the 150th anniversary of Confederation. During this year, we have reflected on our history and what makes this nation one of the most admired nations in the entire world. Part of that reflection has been acknowledging the high degree of volunteerism that Canada enjoys. Today, Nova Scotia has the highest rate of volunteerism per capita in Canada. It is wonderful to see that the large-scale volunteerism of the past does continue today. Today's ceremony and monument serve to acknowledge the women volunteers of the Second World War, for whom we are grateful for their contributions and whose example we follow 70 years later. Let me congratulate Marlene Colton-Moore, the artist who designed the monument unveiled today. She had the challenge of capturing their story and their story of women's volunteerism in general. I certainly commend her for a job well done. Finally, I would like to thank the Halifax Women's Historical Society and its organizers and volunteers who worked hard to make today's ceremony a success. It is your dedication that made this possible today. Avant de conclure, je tiens à remercier les organisateurs et les bénévoles de la société. Votre travail à faire de l'événement d'aujourd'hui un beau succès. Votre dévouement est grandement apprécié. Thank you for inviting us here today. It is truly an honor and a privilege to have been asked and to be able to participate in this such a wonderful event. Thank you.
Everybody hear my melodious voice? But you're not going to miss much if you don't. First, I must say I'm really honored to be asked to say a few words. My mind went back to myself as a young girl with beautiful dark hair and an eye for the boys. And I worked through high school and into my university years and to become a social worker. I cannot put into words what it was to be here at the Waterfront Father didn't like the name going to the Waterfront. He thought that that was not for his daughter. But I loved every minute of it. And we greeted troops coming back, but I think one of the most exciting days or evenings for me, there was a hospital shift coming, and we were in the canteen with our little Red Cross hats on, looking very, very bright, happy. And the gangplank came, and one of the first persons to come down that gangplank was my Uncle Jack, who had served overseas and was invalid at home. And breaking all protocol, I ran out of the canteen. I grabbed him and said, "Oh, Uncle Jack, we didn't know you were coming home, darling." And I felt like a movie star because all these handsome people said, I'm an uncle too, but it was my one evening of utter fame, so I knew how a movie actress would feel. But to be part of that history of Halifax, meeting ships coming back with war brides, and as young women in a canteen with coffee and donuts, we were there welcoming. And they would say to you, is it really a long distance to Alberta? Well, I said, darling, you couldn't walk it. It was a part of my life that was so very special. And I am so thankful, not that I had to work after a war, that terrible war that took so many of the young men and women whom I had gone to high school and into my first year of university. And to be here today and to be honoring all of this, thank you so much for allowing me a minute to say that it is a terrible thing to say, but for a young girl, if you can visualize with slim and kind of pretty, with lots of dark curls, I had a wonderful war.
To be here with you on the Halifax waterfront, and I must say, on a day that we're celebrating the leadership of amazing women, it's a great honor to follow Marjorie Lindsay at the podium. So thank you for your kind storytelling and great words, Marjorie. And I also want to mention the leadership of the sculptor Marlene, Margie, who wove the basket. Marjorie, Marlene, and Margie. We're on a roll here. And Sue Surs is a landscape architect who helped with the emplacement out there, and she pointed out to me something very specific about the concrete plinth that it's on. If you'll notice, the concrete squares are brushed in opposing patterns to create the idea of a quilt. So there's something more there about blankets and care taken, even in something as subtle as the plinth. Well, it was only a few days ago that we were gathered at 11 in the morning on the 11th day of the 11th month to remember those who fought for Canada in times of war. And today's honorees deserve a day and a memorial of their own. These unsung heroes, that so many of whom are among us today, these Nova Scotia women volunteers supported soldiers and their families during World War II. They fed over 100,000 servicemen passing through Halifax, bound for the battlefields of Europe and North Africa. They knit millions of articles of clothing. Young girls patriotically salvaged scrap metal to be transformed into planes and tanks like you see in the back of that wagon outside. This commemoration places a particular emphasis on African Nova Scotian women whose contributions to Canada's war effort deserve to be much more widely known. This monument will help to make more people aware of the incredible efforts that were made by volunteers to support our troops on the home front. So I'm honored to be just a small part of an event that seeks to give credit where credit is overdue. This could also apply to our, yes. I think this also applies to our collective responsibility to better recognize the contributions of women in general. Women are not well represented in our statues and monuments, something that's been called the bronze ceiling. And according to CBC and the Chronicle Herald, of the 280 statues in Halifax of human likenesses, fewer than 12 are of women. And most of those are fairies, nymphs, and pixies, not depicting real people. So today we changed that. But it's 2017 and things are changing, and women were, in fact, only first recognized as persons under Canadian law in 1929 through the famous Persons case. And the trailblazing women who made this possible were recently honored in a group of statues on Parliament Hill just earlier this year. Now, here in Halifax, another monument will depict women and girls who made a real difference. The past is the past, and we can't change it, but the Government of Canada is committed to recognizing the contributions of women and the contributions that they make every single day. Budget 2017 include, sorry, I'm going to skip that part. To acknowledge how far we've come, you're welcome. To acknowledge how far we've come, we need to pay tribute to those who helped get us all here. I will say we were very pleased to contribute $125,000 through the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program to the sculpture that is unveiled outside today. It's important to note that the Halifax Women's History Society raised 2/3 of the money on their own through fundraising, a significant accomplishment. And there was one member of the group in particular who distinguished herself. Fran Gregor was really an incredible fundraiser there. And if you felt her touch, you knew it. So thank you, Fran, and thank you to everyone who gave so generously. The Society and its supporters have performed a real service for our community in bringing the story of these women volunteers to life. And I think it was about 3 years ago that Sharon McDonald, Elizabeth Ryan, and Fran Gregor came to see me when I was working at Waterfront Development Corporation, and they said, we need a place on the waterfront, we've got this great idea, and through the great collaboration of that now with the Halifax Port Authority, here we are. This new monument in this high foot traffic area is going to enhance tourism. It's going to add a new public space for people to gather. People will visit and reflect and appreciate what these volunteers did for our soldiers, and their families did for all of us. So on behalf of the Government of Canada, thanks to the Halifax Women's History Society and the women and girls who volunteered for freedom, one delicious meal, one knitted sweater, and one salvaged metal pot at a time. Thank you all so much.
Je suis très heureuse d'être ici ce matin à cette occasion très importante. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of Premier Stephen McNeil and to be part of such an historic event. Today in Halifax, the history of women shines on full display with the unveiling of the Volunteers Les Bénévoles. And it's about time. And as we just heard, unless you're, a monarch or a sprite, you wouldn't see women reflected in the statuary here in Nova Scotia. And I don't think it's that unusual to see that situation in a city. Certainly at Mount St. Vincent, we have a room with great photographs of Nova Scotian women there. And earlier this year, I actually unveiled the first virtual statue on the waterfront of a woman. But these are the first statues. And it's significant, actually, that statue was also of a tremendous volunteer, Ruth Goldblum. World War II dramatically changed traditional female roles for women. Thousands of Canadian women maintained farms, branched into the workforce, organized fundraisers, gave blood, knitted comforts for soldiers, salvaged materials, donated skills and items to the war effort. The list goes on. And they did all of this, remember, while they continued to raise children, look after households, and maintain all the responsibilities they had before the war. They did this while adjusting to shortages in supplies, changing routines, and learning new skills. And their contributions to the war helped soldiers abroad, but it also fundamentally reshaped the future of our city, our province, and our country. So this monument shines a light on the women of the city and the province who made lasting change. And while it's impossible to showcase all of the contributions of women during World War II, I'm pleased that the Volunteers highlights a cross-section of efforts by women and children, including African Nova Scotian women. And we heard from the truly excellent sculptor. I'm blown away by those sculptures. But Marlene Hilton-Ward, as she talked about the meatball basket that she had to reproduce, and I don't envy her that task because those are complicated items to make. What the statues do remind us, though, is that during the war, there was segregation of society, and there's still too much of that today. There is still too much segregation along the lines of gender, along racial and economic lines. So we still have work to do, and these statues are a reminder of the work that we have to do to make sure that all Nova Scotians see themselves reflected in today's society. So sharing these stories is an important part of our collective work to advance women's equality here in Nova Scotia. Government and Nova Scotians need to work together in this area, and we're pleased to have contributed to this project to ensure that its important story is told. My hope is that when people, particularly young people, see the monument, they'll be inspired to learn more about the many women in Halifax and in Nova Scotia who were heroes during wartime. And I think that the timing, of course, of the unveiling is especially significant since this is the week following Remembrance Day. These women helped build a better province and made significant gains towards equality. And by ensuring there are monuments to women displayed in our city, the Halifax Women's History Society has also moved us towards equality. In many ways, by taking on this project, they've embodied the spirit of the women honored in this beautiful statue. The Halifax Women's History Society, themselves a group of volunteers, did a tremendous amount of work, raising funds, as Andy said, completing all the research, and hosting the competition for the sculpture. They know that symbols matter. Young women need to see themselves reflected in our society, and I have to tell you, as a mother of 3 children, I'm particularly delighted that my eldest daughter works nearby and will be able to look out her window and see those 3 women on Halifax's waterfront. On behalf of Premier McNeil and of all government, I want to congratulate and thank the Halifax Women's History Society for making the volunteers a reality. Your can-do attitude mirrors that of our forebears, and like them, you saw something that needed doing and you got it done. Today, you've made history.
Your Honours and former Lieutenant Governor, it's wonderful to see Mayanne Francis and Alan Abraham out today. Distinguished guests, supporters of this occasion. I do want to acknowledge we're on the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people, as was said outside, and as we rightly celebrate the 150th anniversary of Confederation, we also do well to remember that for 13,000 years, the Mi'kmaq have been on this land. Pleased as well to see a lot of other folks on the front of the booklet. There's the Red Cross, and there are folks from the Red Cross here today, including the Atlantic Province's developer of fund development, a woman named Bridget Savage, who's like a sister to me over there, and she has my name in the Christmas draw this year, so I wanted to mention Bridget and the Red Cross. CN is in the house, and I'm sure that the fact that CN has its first Atlantic Canadian chair of the board in a century, Robert Pace, I'm sure that had something to do with them making a generous contribution to this as well. So Robert, good to see you. And it is a pleasure to be here with my fellow colleagues from government. For this highly anticipated, it really does live up to the billing, the highly anticipated monument that will end the invisibility of women in the historical record of public art of Halifax. Halifax was all about volunteerism during both world wars. It can be argued that the experience of Halifax and the people who lived here was unique in Canada during the Second War particularly, because while volunteerism happened across the country, it was here in Halifax that the major effort fell as the closest port to Europe. The Premier at the time, A.S. McMillan, in speaking of the effort during the war said, and I quote, "This work has been carried on for more than 5 years and is a record of achievement that tops everything of its kind on this continent." Pretty impressive. The need for volunteers was acute. And while we don't have exact numbers, we know thousands of men, women, and children stepped up. But perhaps more than any other group, it was the women who filled the myriad of duties as most of the men were in Europe in uniform. Salvage campaigns were centered in schools. The little girl figure at the monument is an homage to the salvage effort, which saw paper, metal, bones, and rags collected. It was said there were nearly 8,000 aluminum pots and pans that went into each Spitfire airplane. The African Nova Scotia woman is representative of the huge hospitality effort that Halifax staged. Hostels, canteens, and huts played host to thousands of men who passed through Halifax on their way to war. In fact, in a 2-year period, one canteen served 400,000 hot meals, costing a quarter each. The woman knitting her Mi'kmaq basket is representative of the women across Canada who knit hats and scarves and socks and sweaters and balaclavas for the soldiers. The Red Cross estimates that Canadian women knit 50 million articles. That's a lot. We're honored to have Mi'kmaq elder Margie Peltier, who made the basket that's replicated in the monument, with us here today. And I'd be remiss if I don't mention how this project got started. So Society member and fundraising chair Fran Gregor. Now I met Fran, first of all, when she was chair of the board of the Heart and Stoke Foundation of Nova Scotia. And I joined the board. This was about 100 years ago as well. And Joan Fraser was the executive director, as she was for about 100 years. And that's how I met Fran, deep in the last century. She started researching the role of the St. John's Ambulance Nursing Division during the wars. She discovered the nursing division was credited with more than 200,000 hours of volunteer work carried out in hospitals, clinics, and the Allied Merchant Seamen's Hostel here in Halifax. Now, Fran was somewhat shocked that this work and thousands of other volunteer efforts by women had never been officially recognized. She decided something had to be done, and the idea of the Volunteers Les Bénévoles was born. The original idea was to have a statue of a single woman. Happily, the idea of 3 figures of different ages and ethnicity took shape, and here we are. And once again, in honor of the volunteer work of women, it was women volunteers who made this happen. The dozen members of the Halifax Women's Historical History Society worked tirelessly for nearly 5 years. They came to see me in City Hall early on. We've hosted a couple of events in City Hall in honor of this. We had our beautiful artist come and present the little miniatures. I'm not sure when that was, maybe a few months, 4 or 5 months ago. How many? March 9th. That was a great event. They had the support of 400 members, many of whom are here for this happy occasion today. It's exciting on behalf of the Halifax Regional Municipality to thank you for making this dream a reality. Congratulations to all, and it really is a wonderful day on the waterfront of Halifax. Thank you very much.
I want to talk for 2 minutes about the power of a dream. And when we first met the WOW ladies, women on the waterfront, Janet and Sharon and Fran and Elizabeth and Mary, they came to our office. They started talking about their dream. I wasn't really sure what to make of the dream. Like many of us who hear about a dream, we say, what's it going to take to make that come real? Are they kidding? Can we help them? Can they do it? They're crazy. They're a bunch of crazy people. They weren't crazy. They had a fantastic idea. They put a great team behind them. They reached out across our community to many in the room and many beyond this room. There are far too many people for me to name, but you know who you are, and if they're not here, you know who they are. People who raised money, whether it was $5, $10, $100, or $100,000. Each penny counted. And step by step, the dream became reality. I can't even imagine how the WOW ladies felt today when the purple coverings came off those statues. I had shivers. I was so thrilled for them because today their dream became reality. And I think we would be remiss as a community if those 5 women were not asked to come forward for complete, total recognition. So, Where are you? Mary, Sharon, Janet, Elizabeth, and Fran, come up here, please. We call them the Wow Ladies. Wow. Not to lose a moment, Janet says, would the rest of the board please join for a picture as well, because while they may have fronted the deal, there's a big team of people behind them. So the remaining board members from this society, please join for recognition. It's a bigger wow. So, ladies and gentlemen of our community and our province and our country, the ladies of the Women on the Waterfront here in Halifax, today's version, and I'm sure we will all enjoy it for many, many years to come, the statute versions which are now in front of the Port Authority building. So thank you all for coming, and I believe we are now turning to refreshments.
Thank you so much, Karen. The Port Authority has been just a wonderful friend to the society, and we are very, very grateful to their support as well as for the site. And now, part of the support that the rest of you need is some refreshments. And the buffet